The Shadow on Mill Road. Mill Road was known for its eerie silence. Flanked by dense woods on both sides, it was the kind of place that made your skin crawl even in broad daylight. However, it was the only route Megan could take to reach her new job at the local diner. She had just moved to the small town of Pinehurst and knew little of its dark legends. On her first day, Megan left work late. The sky had turned an ominous shade of black, and the wind howled through the trees as if whispering secrets of the past. She quickened her pace, clutching her coat tighter against the cold. The crunch of leaves underfoot seemed louder than it should have been, amplifying her growing unease. Halfway down Mill Road, her car's headlights flickered and then died, leaving her stranded in the pitch dark. "Great," she muttered, fumbling for her phone. She tried to call for help, but there was no signal. Panic began to set in. She glanced around and saw a faint light through the trees. Desperate, she decided to seek help from whoever lived there. The path through the woods was narrow and overgrown. Branches snagged her hair and clothes, but she pressed on. As she approached, she saw it was an old, dilapidated house. Its windows were shattered, and the door hung loosely on its hinges. The light she had seen was from a single flickering bulb inside. Hesitant but with no other options, Megan knocked on the door. It creaked open at her touch, revealing a dimly lit hallway. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no response. She took a cautious step inside. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something metallic. The floorboards creaked under her weight as she ventured further. On the walls, she noticed old photographs, their faces scratched out, and bizarre symbols she couldn't comprehend. Her footsteps echoed in the empty space, heightening her anxiety. In the living room, she found the source of the light, an old oil lamp on a dusty table. Next to it was a book, ancient and tattered. Curious, she opened it and saw it was filled with handwritten notes and drawings of twisted, shadowy figures. Her heart raced as she read passages about summoning spirits and dark rituals. A sudden noise from upstairs made her jump. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate. Megan's instinct screamed at her to leave, but something compelled her to stay. She tiptoed to the staircase and peered up. The dim light barely reached the top, leaving the rest shrouded in darkness. "Megan," a voice whispered from the shadows. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't told anyone her name since she arrived in Pinehurst. Panic surged through her as she backed away, but the floorboards behind her creaked. She spun around to find a tall, shadowy figure looming over her. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its presence exuded malevolence. Megan's scream caught in her throat as the figure reached out a skeletal hand. She turned and bolted out of the house, not daring to look back. The woods seemed even more menacing as she stumbled through them, branches clawing at her frantically. She burst back onto Mill Road, gasping for breath, and saw headlights in the distance. A car was approaching. She waved her arms, desperate for help. The vehicle slowed down and stopped beside her. The driver, an elderly man with kind eyes, rolled down the window. "Are you all right, miss?" Megan frantically explained her ordeal, and the man's face grew grave. "You must have wandered into the old Whitaker house," he said. "That place has been abandoned for years. Locals say it's cursed." He offered her a ride back to town, and she gratefully accepted. As they drove away, Megan glanced back at the woods. In the rearview mirror, she saw the shadowy figure standing at the edge, watching her with those haunting eyes. Days passed, but the terror of that night clung to Megan like a shadow. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At work, she often caught glimpses of a dark figure in the corner of her eye, only for it to vanish when she looked directly at it. She started to hear whispers in the dead of night, calling her name. One evening, determined to confront her fear, she researched the Whitaker house. She found old newspaper articles detailing the mysterious disappearance of the Whitaker family. Locals believed they had dabbled in dark magic, summoning something beyond their control. The house was said to be a gateway for malevolent spirits. Despite her growing dread, Megan felt drawn to the house. She needed answers. Armed with a flashlight and a resolve to face her fear, she returned to Mill Road. The night was eerily similar to her first encounter, with the same oppressive darkness and howling wind. She reached the house, its sinister aura even more palpable. Stepping inside, she called out, "I'm not afraid of you." Her voice echoed through the empty rooms. The shadowy figure appeared at the top of the stairs, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. Megan stood her ground. "What do you want?" she demanded. The figure moved closer, and she could feel the air grow colder. It pointed a skeletal finger at the book on the table. Megan realized it wanted her to read from it. With trembling hands, she opened the book and began to recite the incantations. The house seemed to come alive, shaking violently as the shadow figure shrieked in anger. The symbols on the walls glowed, and a powerful force pulled at her, but she continued reading. Finally, with a deafening roar, the figure was sucked into the book, which snapped shut and burst into flames. The house fell silent, its oppressive atmosphere lifting. Megan stumbled outside, watching as the house crumbled into dust. Exhausted but relieved, she returned to her car. As she drove away from Mill Road, she felt a sense of closure. The shadow that had haunted her was gone. Pinehurst was peaceful once more, and Megan knew she had faced and conquered the darkness. But sometimes, late at night, she still heard whispers in the wind, a reminder that some shadows never truly vanish.